You're listening to Heartbeat Radio. I'm your host, Cindi Bright. Heartbeat Radio is a conversation aimed to take the pulse of corporate America. Opportunities for people of color, we're getting lost in the shuffle of change. I'm that provocateur of change. The hearts of corporate America are addressed. Access and opportunities will be accelerated for all people. Through Heartbeat Radio, you will gain a deeper understanding of what is necessary for change. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Heartbeat Radio. I'm your host, Cindi Bright, running right on schedule tonight. We had a little bit of a panic. Tonight our show is, as you saw, I'm going to be talking this evening about the Black women and white women and working together. I had some guests scheduled to come on with me. This is the first time in my, now headed in my fifth year doing the show, that I've actually made the decision to cancel my guests. And I'm canceling them because while we still want to have the conversation, I need to ensure that this conversation that we have about Black and white women working together is in the spirit, I think, of how the work that I'm doing. And my co-host, let's bring Joy Stanford in with me tonight. We've been talking about it this afternoon quite a bit, about having this conversation. Now, this conversation is necessary to have. And I think what's important about talking about the relationships between Black women and white women is that, and I'm going to speak for myself here because I'm not the perfect angel when it comes to trying to deal with a lot of these issues. And I have been known myself. Y'all have been listening to me long enough to know I call things out the way I see them, and I call out poor behavior. But I also recognize that there are white women who are allies and who do work with us and who are out in the streets fighting these battles with us. And so I want to empower and make sure that we are respectful to those women who are doing that. So that's kind of the spirit of the conversation, Joy, I want to have today. So let's welcome Joy in with me this evening. Joy, welcome
Thank
on
you.
with me today. We were having quite a conversation about this earlier
We
today.
were. We're trying to figure out how we do this and do it in the spirit of, like you said, um, collaboration, love, forgiveness, all of the above. So, how do we
Yeah.
do that?
And, some of the things that we were talking about, I'm trying to adjust my camera and things here. Some of the things we were talking about are in the spirit of, how do we not alienate the women that we need to fight this battle with us? And, there are some examples. We'll talk about an article here in just a few minutes that came out that you and I were discussing at length this
Oh,
afternoon
yeah,
about what does this all mean. Maybe we'll show the article really quick. There was an article that came out about Brene Brown, and I don't know if those of you who are
one
on
of my
LinkedIn,
favorites. One of my
if anybody saw
favorites.
that article that came out. If you are listening in and saw the article, there was, let's see, we're showing it. Let's see if we scroll it down a little bit. This was the subject of it: the danger of courage culture and why Brene Brown isn't for Black folk. It was a pretty interesting article, I think. There was a lot that I agreed with in here about. The article was pretty pointed about um, the harm. Like, you could argue whether it's intentional or not, or just out of ignorance, but whether her work in vulnerability, whether her same strategies that she's been able to use as a white woman in this country actually works for Black
Black
women.
women.
So it's the
Yes.
same kind of issues that came up with Sheryl Sandberg, of which I have publicly spoken about, of which Robin
In your book,
DiAngelo, in
in
my
your book,
book,
yes.
of which Robin DiAngelo, who wrote the book White Fragility, I have also called that out too, because the question we're all asking is, where is the line with the responsibility of white women who are making money? You have to read the article because it's pretty interesting to talk about, or the way it's written about, the cash advances that they get to help them get their books to market. They become New York bestsellers, and they start, pulling in $100,000 for each speaking gig, and they're inadvertently creating some harm to Black women by doing that. And so we wrestle with constantly, where's the mix? Like, where's the line with that? And what responsibility do they have to understand what they're doing to brown and black women.
Right.
Where's that line? What do you think about that, Joy?
Well, first of all, I am a Brene Brown fan, although I do agree with a lot of points of this article because what are the advances that the Black authors are getting? And I love that she gave us a list in the article. There's a link, you can click on it, and it gives you a list of Black literary folks who have written books in this same realm, ecosystem, if you want to call it, about vulnerability, about, you know, how do you make, what do you do when you're the 10 top things you do as a leader and things like that. So, but my biggest question that she asked was, what about Black authors and the advances or the advances they're not getting? So, what does that look like? And if it doesn't look like anything, which it doesn't, we all know, Cindi Bright, you wrote a book. Erin Jones, shout out to her. She's wrote a book too. What did you have to do to get your book published? Was it the same hoops that you had to jump through? No, many more hoops, many more barriers in the way. And so it's a good question to be asking. And again, I'll say of Brene Brown, but this article does ask some questions that we need to think about as Black women. We don't have the same, what do they say, protection and like guard against around us that white women may have. And so
White women
where
do
we
have.
Yeah. Yes, some don't, we do know some of our sisters do not. It's socioeconomics, people. And so how do we get around that? How do we get past that? And her lived experiences is the same lived experience as you or I. And so where does that leave us in this realm of vulnerability?
I want to unpack that a little bit because I was vulnerable in my book. I told chapter 1, I told some stuff about myself. And I've had people question me about, why would you do that?
Yes.
And and in fact, I saw a review. Somebody did a review on my book on Amazon and said, you were too vulnerable. But the reason I decided to be that and do that was to show my humanness too, because the perception of us, women like me, who look like me, the standards of which that we are held against. I can talk a lot about the book publishing process and what that was like. The standards are different for us, and no one wants to hear that. The standards are different for us. And so I did it to show my
we don't
humanness.
Get $100,000 up front.
And I'm just as accomplished. So let me just be clear, from an education perspective, from a corporate career, I have it. I clearly have not done the best job of marketing myself, and that's on one level. But it was tough to do that, to get the book, because the book costs me money. Like, it's a lot of money to get a book to market, and not many people. I mean, the sacrifices that I had to make to do that. My editor can tell you, Erin Donnelly, who was with me in this journey, what
step of the way,
what I had to do to get a book out. Like, it's a no joke process, and not a lot of people can do it. And so these questions that are being asked about the responsibility of white women to either help or open doors or
turn around and give a hand up.
I mean, Brene Brown's been very successful.
She has. And there's a lot of Black women that have promoted her, and that some of us love her books. And when we talked about it earlier, I said to you, I didn't read it as a black and white thing. I read it as a woman thing. I read it from a woman's perspective. And so I came into it like I've been vulnerable, or I've not let myself be vulnerable. This author shined a different perspective on her books.
Because the consequences, so these are the things we don't talk openly about and that make people feel uncomfortable. Let me rephrase these. It makes white people feel uncomfortable having this kind of a conversation, but we have to do it. Like, I'm on air every week talking about these things because I'm trying to normalize these kind of conversations. We've got to stop dancing around the topics that are creating harm to brown and black people,
And
Black women.
she said several Black women came at her online because her LinkedIn of this critique of this book went viral, and
Mhm.
Black women came for her. And she's a Black woman. And
Mhm.
I found that really
The Black woman
interesting.
who wrote the critique on it
Yes.
had other Black women come at her. Do
Yeah.
you recall what some of the attacks were?
No, because I was looking for the posts and they were gone already. And so I think the link we were looking at didn't have that. So I'm gonna have to go on LinkedIn and look at that. But
So it's an interesting it's a
yeah,
dilemma, and I think this is a dilemma from white women's perspective too, is how do they engage with us? How do they have conversations with us? How do they help fight our, these battles on behalf of us? If what they have to be concerned with is a huge backlash from us when they publish or when this is their lens on how they see it. These are the questions they're asking. And so, earlier today we were talking about, one of the reasons why I canceled my show is because there's just some conflict. There's some conflict going on, brewing about some other things in the DEI community with white women. And a white woman that it involved, I find to be an incredible ally. I have seen her work. I've been the recipient of things that she is out there fighting and doing. And so, I wanna honor her and those women that
amen.
are doing
Yeah.
this work because this is not easy work for us to do.
It's exhausting work, is what it is. It's exhausting work because we have to deal with it in our everyday life. And then you go out and you do it as a job. I can't even imagine. I just cannot even imagine. I look at you and you're the 80-hour plus a week chick, and I'm like, how do you do that? I've got to rest.
But I question it a lot.
Yeah,
I was telling you
yeah.
about having lunch with a friend of mine that hadn't had a couple weeks ago, and I hadn't seen her in years, and just some of the things that she said to me that just kind of penetrated my spirit a lot about, like, how do you do like, why do you do this, Cindy? Like, you've been consistent ever since I've known you for 15 years. You just and so when I left at dinner that night, I was like, why am I working 80 hours a week? Like, it does beg the question about this fight. It does beg the question.
So when you came tonight, you're like, we're gonna have to cancel the show and let's talk about conflict amongst
Let's talk about conflict. Like how,
women. And
yes, the conflict between women is a definite. I mean, this has got to be top of mind in every organization.
yes,
Like, if we're not dealing with conflict of women and harm that is created by women to other women, we're never going to get at the patriarchy unless we start
correct.
looking at ourselves.
Yes.
Now, you're aware of a personal situation I have where I had a friend who I got into conflict with recently. And I got into conflict with that person because I aimed to address some harm that was being done to my business by the behavior of that person.
And what did I say? And you already knew you were going to do it. Go back, repair, give grace.
And I tried to do that. And I got bitch slapped when I tried to do that. And so I said to Joy that, I'm willing to own my mess.
Right.
If I've contributed to it, but where's their responsibility?
Right.
And so if people are not willing to meet you, look, conflict is never one-sided. And so, what I would have preferred in that situation is them to ask me to explain it. Like, what happened, or why do you feel that way?
Right.
Or
Right.
what can I do different? How do we repair this? Was this relationship worth? I thought it was. That's why I went back, because I genuinely thought we were friends.
And you genuinely, I think, are still mourning the loss of that friendship. I want to put that out there just to say.
Yeah, it was just hurtful to,
Yes, that friendship had to
dissolve.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want my business to be harmed.
Right.
And so when you're Black, and you're doing any element of business in town, you can't have any tainting on your work or your reputation. I mean, everybody doesn't like me. I'm not for everybody, and I'm certainly not trying to please everybody, but I genuinely was trying to I thought it was a friendship. And
Right.
so it shows me continually how, like, how do you trust anymore? How do you, even when you think people have your back, do they really? And when you think about it on a race line, the historic pattern of behavior in my 57 years of what I have watched happen to Black women at the hands of white women, the pattern is not good. And so how do we deal with that issue? Because that to me is fundamentally the only way we can start to take some of these issues forward.
And there's many of us who have friends who we've had for, okay, I'll say it, 40 years and more. I have to say that to myself over and over again. But there's definitely, I have white friends that I've had for 47 years, 50 years, going on 50 years. And those are my ride or die. Like there's no way to replicate those friendships and those connections. In business, I've had great friendships. I've always been a team player, so I've built great relationships in business as well. And I hope that I've given grace. I know I haven't in some respects. I have not given grace, but in other times I feel like I have. And so I think there's always a chance for healing. But what do you do if someone you feel like wrongs you? Okay. And it's a white woman. What do we do, Cindi? Like, do we stand in all of our, that was wrong? Or do we say, let's can we talk this out and let me tell you how I feel? Because I always feel like that's just a better way to go. We're going to talk about how I felt when you did XYZ, and then you can tell me the same thing, and then we can come to some sort of, I don't know, middle ground.
Now, what I will say about that, Joy, is that, you know, the experience that Black women have had is that we're listened to from the lens of responding back and not from a place of hearing what we're saying. And so, you know, if we're trying to have dialogue and you're unwilling to open yourself up, or in Brene Brown's words, if you're unwilling to be vulnerable in those spaces and recognize maybe you don't know it all, maybe you don't understand what our experience is.
And is that bad to acknowledge that? Because most women will be like, I can't say that. I can't acknowledge that.
And can you just align with us even though you don't agree with us? It's what we've had to do our entire careers and lives. We don't agree with things that are said and done in our professional life, but we go along with it because we're not the dominant culture, and you can only fight so many battles and you can't fix it all.
Right.
Will they work for us and align with us and help, or will they come at us with knives continually to take from us what they feel is theirs? That behavior is real.
You experienced it.
A lot.
Yeah.
What is it about me? Is it my outspokenness? Is it
where you worked?
Or being someone who is confident, or when you don't allow people to shatter you to make themselves feel better?
Yes.
Like, everybody who knows me knows I don't put up with nothing.
Do we need to diminish ourselves to make other people feel better? No.
Or do we have to constantly be the people who have to pivot and apologize for everything, and you never get an apology from
the
them?
other side? Yeah. That's a tough one, but I think there's room for grace. I think there's room for healing. I think there's room for a conversation. It's not an easy conversation a lot of times, and I think that's going into it. You're right. Can you say, I was wrong? I didn't do that right. I didn't respond to that right. Hold me accountable to say I was wrong in that moment. But then I'm somebody who holds a grudge, so I shouldn't. I admitted that to you earlier.
You did. And I have a huge heart. It may not.
I have a big heart.
I have a huge heart for people.
You hurt my feelings.
And is it really that difficult when you see another human that you've harmed or hurt? Even if, where was I reading about? this was more in my own personal transformation of being a mother-in-law. So I was reading some things about, they're just sometimes it's just not worth, saying anything. You just have to allow them to figure it out on their own, right? This is a parent thing anyhow, but
Right.
how do you not step in or try to prove your point? Well, you
You're not
can't.
supposed
You
to.
can't. So
You're
just
the
let it be.
monster-in-law. You can't do that.
And so think about that. In every scenario, in every scenario of a Black woman's life, when we walk into an organization, where the prize the day we come in because we just checked a box. And so that helps a bonus dollar get paid out. But as soon as we start, we got 90 days to get ourselves acclimated. And as soon as we start addressing or um, trying to change something, then that's when the whole, you use the term monster. That's what we're painted as. And so when
You're
back
the
to
angry Black woman.
so back to my vulnerability was because I want people. I'm tired of being seen as not human. I'm tired of people referring to me as a strong woman, and so therefore she can tolerate their BS. That's People treat me that way, and literally come back at me and say, "But you're a strong woman, Cindi." And so I'm like, y'all don't seem to get strength is the result of pain. And so somebody like me, you should be able to look at and see just how much stuff I have been through. And so it is not easy to be a strong woman who is standing up and
Right,
trying to
right.
change the world and who's not intimidated by people who are mediocre, and still want to believe that they are so superior to us, and carry on that way.
Right.
Yeah.
I think we can both agree that we had tough conversations and we understand that those conversations need to happen. And we've stood there and taken a bunch of crap. And at the same time, we've been accused of being those angry Black women. But at the same time, we were still there every day, showing up every day. And that's what I feel like that's like, if you come back, if you're coming back to make it better, yes. But if you're not gonna be willing to, like we said earlier, own it. Is that what you said? Yeah,
Mhm.
own it. You're willing to own your own stuff. Then that's where the conflict kind of stays and the grudge kind of starts.
How what how do we help people? Um, it just seems like
Come back to
society
the table. That's
or
how we help people. We tell them come back to the table. If you're
but
having conflict, come back to the
if they're
table.
not willing to receive feedback, and or I'm just back to my mourning here, but mourning, MOURNING.
Yeah.
How if somebody won't even be respectful to talk to you, and they talk to you so disrespectfully and basically tell you you're all the problem without even stopping to try to understand, maybe I did something here. And by the way, there are times, even if I don't feel I've done anything, I still bite that bullet because it's easier to
Yeah.
just not argue with
Move
people over
on.
it and move on,
Yeah.
or I walk away. Like,
Right.
there's been many situations I'm just like, um, ooh, I just caught a word that came to my tongue.
Stop.
Stop it. That was yeah, just walk away from that and not allow it in anymore. And I've had to do a lot of that, particularly on this last couple of years, and maybe post after I battled health problems, and I decided that I'm not allowing people to rattle me or to try to make me be a monster anymore. I'm not a monster, and people who are in my inner circle know that I'm not.
Right. And I think that a lot of times when we go through things like conflict with someone, conflict at a job, conflict in a relationship, we get to the point where we're like, it makes us stronger, but it's not, going through that storm is not always fun at
Mhm.
all. But it does make us stronger when we come out on the other side. But sometimes it makes us stronger to say, no, I'm not going to put up with the crap. And
I'm just trying to figure out how we get, back to the race line. How do we get these conversations to the table? Like, how do we get this
we can
conversation?
bring some women together to do that.
Uh, Yeah, I suppose we could if we
We could
had.
do a panel of women.
And Black women are exhausted of being on these panels and
Right.
all that too. That's what I was taking a deep breath about.
This is true.
I was asking it
You're
rhetorically,
right.
not
Yeah.
we as Cindy and Joy,
Come on.
but to the audience. What is it we do? Yeah,
See,
because
Queen said yes. She said yes. See, our audience said yes. That's what we need to do. Yes. I mean, it doesn't have to be us, but I just think advising people, or if you want to say that, we're just talking here, but telling you, come back to the table, come back to it, circle back. Is that what Aaron Jones calls it? She calls it circle back, which I really like. Her and Dr. Molly call it circle back. So you're just circling back with somebody, just find out, how did that land? How did that feel? You know, why can't we do that? Especially with white women and Black women together.
yeah. Do you think there's any hope in this
Absolutely.
issue?
Absolutely. See, Queenie's like, we keep talking. Yeah, keep talking. No, I like that. Silence has never brought change. I like that. Yeah, I love that. You are right. Because we got to speak out about it. And here we are talking about it, talking about conflict between white women and Black women, and just trying to figure it out.
And how do we, in the meantime, I know we've got to go to commercial here. When we come back, let's pick back up about advice we can give Black women in the workplace who are suffering at the hands of this,
Ooh.
who can't go to their supervisors and give feedback. So let's take a quick break and we'll come back and pick that up.
Half that up in Saks, I favor Black businesses. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's Black. Yeah. Yeah. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's Black. Yo.
Would you like to see when your favorite Rainier Avenue Radio show comes on? Check out our show schedule, updated weekly at rainieravenueradio.world.
You probably have questions about COVID vaccines. Here are some answers about how they're being made.
How are COVID vaccines being produced faster?
Usually, vaccine testing and production are separate steps. But because of the pandemic, vaccines are being developed on parallel tracks. So both steps are happening just at the same time.
How are the vaccines being tested?
Right now, several different COVID vaccines are in testing. Each go through multiple clinical trials with up to thousands of volunteers.
How do vaccines get approved?
Not all COVID vaccine versions will make it to the final stages of testing and approval. Produced vaccines that do not pass clinical trials will be destroyed. But for those that do pass, a team of medical experts will examine test results and possible side effects. If the vaccine is effective and safe, it gets approved and gets to you. Go to covidvaccinewa.org to learn more. A message from the state of Washington.
The beat of the Fox with nastiness is back on K-Fox Night Beat.
Yo, what's the deal? It's the legendary Hall of Fame DJ Mixmaster Ice from UTFO.
What's up? Who you thought this is? This is Sir Mix-a-Lot.
And this is Terry Lewis.
And I'm Grand Mixer GMS.
What's up, y'all? This is DJ Third Degree.
This is JJ Hudson from the High Children family.
Sunday nights from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's K-Fox Night Beat with DJ Nastiness.
Bringing back the memories.
Bringing back the memories.
Bringing Seattle's hottest music.
Bringing Seattle's hottest music. Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
That's right.
Peace.
Are you a cultural producer who has been impacted by the pandemic? Four Culture is offering relief grants between $1,000 and $12,000 to cover your COVID-related losses and help you move forward with your creative work. If you're creating cultural experiences in any discipline at any stage of your career, you should apply. Exhibit designers, museum educators, archivists, restoration professionals, curators, archaeologists, history researchers, artists, and more. That means you. Not sure if you're a fit? Give them a call and they'll talk you through it. The deadline to apply is Wednesday, February 2nd. Head to forculture.org/recovery to get information on virtual group workshops, application support, language translation, and more. That's forculture.org/recovery.
Rainier Avenue Radio.world is your 24/7 digital media hub. Tune in at Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and TuneIn apps.
Half that up in sacks. I favor black businesses. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Yeah. Yeah. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Yo.
Welcome back to Heartbeat Radio. I'm your host, Cindi Bright. I'm fussing with my headsets because it's messing up my hair tonight. Hey, Joy Stanford is here with me again as my co-host tonight, and we're talking about the whole Black women, white women relationship conflict and how we address these issues, or at least try to move these issues forward. We're going to talk a little bit about Black women showing up, but we had a guest who made
really
this
good
comment, a really good comment.
Yeah.
We're going to add this comment up
that
here.
comment?
There it is.
Like an awesome comment.
Yeah. So there's women who say they're allies, hold them to it at work, went out and about
in non-confrontation ways.
It's something we have to learn how to do. Yeah, it's an interesting comment. Jocelyn, who thank you for joining this conversation with us tonight. What is an ally at work? Like, Joy, what is an ally at work?
I don't know. Look like? I don't remember having those. I don't remember having those at work. I'm sure I did. I had friends, I have team members, so I did have allies. But when the rubber hit the road, I didn't have those. And I look back, your book made me look back on what I say today. And I've said this to you before. It's just death by 1,000 cuts. Mm-hmm. I know that's been written and said many times in many books and articles, but it was just those microaggressions and slight things that people would do or say, especially white women in positions of power.
I'm going to give an example of an ally because I had a good white woman ally, and I'm actually going to call her out by name because it's worth mentioning. She's my old boss, and her name is Katie Bevan. Katie is a professor now at New York University.
Hey, Katie.
And she has a business now that is focused on women empowerment too. It's been an interesting transformation. I haven't worked for her in a decade now. I've been on my own since 2012. But I will give examples of the things that she did that were so unique to me that I had never experienced it before. And let me give some examples of that. I was trying to read comments coming in at the same time. What Katie did, I'll never forget. I used to work for a global financial services firm, and she was in New York, and I was at I had been traveling this day. I was at my San Francisco office, and she sent me a note and said, "Cindi, can I talk to you?" And so the very first thing I thought is, I'm getting fired, right? I mean, it's the first thought you think.
Oh yeah.
When
can I talk to you? Yeah, I'm going to send you an email.
But it was really interesting. So I, took my cell phone and I walked out to take her call. And her first question to me was, she said, "Cindi," she's a British woman. She's like, "Cindi, do you know who Deepak Chopra is?" And I was like, "Duh, Katie, like, I know who that is. Like, why?" And so she said, "I was looking into a course for you. I was looking into something that I thought you might be interested in." And so she said, it's a course, and it was called The Soul of Leadership. And it was and she sent me. I mean, she literally got the funding, sent me back to Northwestern University. And I'm telling you, to this day, that decision that she made when I went back there, because Deepak Chopra was my professor. And I remember sitting next to him in class and talking to him and taking pictures with them. And but here's what happened. When I was in that class, most of the people that were in the classes at that time were doctors and lawyers, and I was an HR person. So I was wrestling with my own worth about whether I was worthy to be in a class
Should
like
I be here?
But it lit a friggin' fire on me. And look at me now, 10 years later, or 12 years later. And what I remember saying to myself is, when I finished that course, I remember saying, I can do this. And I remember that was the impetus for me going back to school to get my MBA, because I sat in a classroom next to other people who had PhDs, and I participated at the same level as they did. And it showed me that I can do the same things. Right. And so I'm sharing that story because I didn't ask for her to do anything for me. She called me and said, "I was looking out for you." And when Katie went to get her doctorate degree, this was maybe about 4 years ago, when she graduated, she sent me a note and said, "Would you like to come back?" I took a red eye to New York that night to go watch her get her doctorate degree because that woman,
That's
I mean,
awesome.
so I'm just sharing that because that's an example when white women don't understand the power that they have because they've been put in positions of power where they have control and access and money in these organizations and they can make things happen for us. I found that to be a unique thing because I'd never ever seen in my career a white woman actually extend a hand and offer to help me. It's usually
I've had that. I
Yeah.
could definitely say I've had that. But that's incredible, Cindy. Like, it's Deepak Chopra.
It was Deepak Chopra.
That's pretty cool.
Mhm.
I've had some great mentors and allies along the way. I'll name one, Elizabeth Bamber. I was at Group Health for 10 years, and 5 years I spent in the executive office. And she encouraged me to go back to school. Just made it so like, nope, you got to leave at this time. You got to go. And I will tell you my experience in the executive office. And when I left there, the next department I went to, which I will not name, people already know. If you know me, you know, was much different.
I'm going to re-show this comment here because this is an important comment right here.
It's still happening.
Because it happens to most Black women that I know, and it's
Yeah.
happened to me.
Yeah. It's happened to me. Yep.
Most Black women are working in hostile work environments. And let's
Not my environment now. Love my environment now. I want to make that clear. Yeah, not my environment now.
And I'm not on a W-2 anymore. So that was a game changer to make the decision to earn my own money without having to depend on them
Absolutely.
to control it. And I say that to every
Absolutely.
Black woman, do not put yourself in the position where your food and roof is dependent on a white woman. I've said that because it can switch on a dime. It can switch on a dime. And Gwen, I'm not bringing you on because I want you to get out of that situation first, and then I will bring you on. And you can talk about what that experience was like. We don't want to give them more ammunition to create more hostility towards you. And that's exactly what will happen.
Exactly.
Because I remember when I went through my own trial, all that was going on. I remember when I won the trial, you have to buy my book, everybody. You have to buy my book and read what went down. But I remember my attorney said, Cindy, you got to go out publicly and speak about this. Like, it's the second largest employment verdict in the state of Washington. And I looked at her and I'm like, are you crazy?
Like, no way.
I'm a Black woman. I cannot go out publicly and be talking about these people. And here I am now talking about these people. But it's just real. These are real examples.
Are any of those people still at that company? That's the question.
Who knows?
Cindy.
I have no idea.
You have no idea. Okay.
I don't
That
follow.
would be interesting to know.
No, I shed that stuff very quickly after when I actually writing the book was so therapeutic for me because I was finally able to get my truth out there and show who the monsters really were.
Right.
And that company, and it wasn't me.
It wasn't you.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. Let's talk about Black women showing up.
Let's talk about that.
I love this quote, and I think it's from Ariana Presley. Black women have historically done the most for our country while receiving the least recognition. And she said that in the spirit of Maya Angelou being on the Quarter and given recognition to her. But she got it after she passed, posthumously. And she's one of my favorite writers. And also saw something on Instagram that I couldn't bring back up, but a Black woman's being interviewed, and she was asking, why do Black women continually show up when the chips are down? Why do we show up? So let's ask the audience. Why do we show up?
Why are we continuing
no matter what? No matter if we're down and out, no matter if we're trying to figure out how we have to pay our rent or our mortgage, no matter if we, have to make 3 lunches for our kids. It doesn't matter. We're showing up. We continue to show up in all the spaces and places, politics, business, nonprofits, you name it, we are showing up. What did Jocelyn say? Because they can always depend on us. Yes, but the question is why? Why are we so dependable?
That's a great question. Why is that? I don't know the answer to that. I mean, one of the things I said in my
Because we
book,
take it all on.
one of the things I said in my book is that the difference between white women and black women is that white women have been raised as princesses and we've been raised as warriors. And so I think from our family lineage, nothing was easy for our families. And so our families just didn't have they just didn't have the privilege. And so I watched my own family struggle and my father go back to school at night and all the things trying to feed his kids. And while my father actually created me in a way that I didn't realize he did until I got older in life by some homework I used to type up for him when he was in school. And that homework he used to type up, I used to type up for him pre-computers, white out, the little tabs when you're typing on a typewriter.
Yeah, I remember those.
My father was trying to get a paralegal degree. I think my father did receive a paralegal degree, but in that process, I didn't know this till I was older. I was typing up interrogatories for his law class. And the interrogatories were all about Colonel Angel. I remember the name vividly. And all the black men, my father was a Union steward, and all the black men that were suffering at the hands of this colonel. And so I didn't know at the time that he was empowering me to go out into the world and fight for this stuff. And so when we ask the question, like, where does it come from? I think unconsciously, because our families are suffer. Our kids, black women who have black male children who we live in fear every day when our children leave the house. It's created that fire inside of us to do something about it because we know that the whites are not going to protect us. We know that. That's a Dave Chappelle thing. I still use that terminology, but we know we're not protected.
Right.
And so I think when you look in business, which is always my lens, black women can do 50 things and run circles around most of these other women that are there. And it comes from what we've been raised to do and be.
I had a woman ask me that I was helping, nice young lady, white woman, single mom. She's like, how do you know who to call? And how do you know where to go for all this help and resources? And she's like, and I said, I don't know. I just know. But I think back, I mean, we both were single moms at one point. I think back, I don't know how we did it. I don't. I think about this all the time now. How did I do that? I wasn't as tired, number one.
We were younger,
we were younger. Okay, I'll take that. But we just made do. Like, we made sure our kids had what they needed. We made sure they went to school. We made sure. And then there's these parents who are just like, they won't go to school. What do you mean they won't go to school? Is it a choice? I didn't realize it was a choice.
When we just didn't put them in timeout. When they tried to play that mess, they behinds were carted off to school. And so
it's not a choice.
This is a whole different.
I'll drop you at school. I don't know what you're gonna do, but I'll be back to pick you up at 3:00. So it's just like things like that. I'm like, we just had to get it done. It just needed to get done. And I remember watching my mom, my godmother, my aunties, Birdie, all of the above, all of the black women in my life who just made it happen. And my mom did.
God's grace. That's so true. Like,
oh, absolutely.
A way was always made. I have nothing but, look, my putting my son on my back. People will tell you the stories about the stuff I had to endure living in Bellevue. Very white privileged community, and to have an athlete son who was creating ripples a little bit in the community
because he was good.
But they watched me put him on my back, and I was like a friggin' the women in Black Panther that had those forks. That was me.
Okay,
I was like, you mess with my son, you mess with me. But more importantly, it was so important to me at that time to make sure he got educated because the backlash of Black men in America, Black people in America, and, I come out of HR, out of corporate, so I saw what was going on to them. And so it was my mission to make sure I removed every barrier out of his way, to make sure he got what he needed to get so that he can get educated. So Black women show up because if we don't show up, the consequences to us and our families is so
Much more severe.
Yes.
Much more severe. Oh, my mother fought the military as a civil servant fearlessly. She was and continues to be my inspiration to fight for justice. All right, now, Prism 7.
All right,
thank
Prism
you.
7. We've not seen your name on the show. Thank you for
Yeah,
joining
thank you
us
for
tonight
joining.
and listening to
That's
this.
awesome. And thank you
Mhm.
to your mom. I mean, whose mom didn't have to fight something to make sure?
Well, to the degree, what are the battles that they had to fight? Every mom has to fight, but the degree of fight is, I think, what distinguishes Black women. So when we talk about why do Black women always show up, that's why I'm just saying, getting Black women elected back, and we're not going to talk politics tonight, but I swear this country would be in a very different place if it's
If there
run
was,
by Black women.
hello.
Right?
And that's what they're all scared of right now
Well, they are
at the national level.
And they've muted Kamala. Vice President Kamala, they've muted her.
Where has our Kamala been? We have not, because I'm thinking we can't pass those voting bills. Really, it's 2 bills. They should have already come out. We should have already voted on them, and they're bills now. Hello, they're law, right? No. What are we doing? What's happening?
What are we doing? What is happening this year?
Sitting on our hands, doing nothing. Well, they're trying to, like you said, they're muting her and they're trying to take her power away.
They're trying to take her power away.
Absolutely.
And the blog I just wrote about that this week is about, so this is interesting about watching it because we expect the attacks to come from the right whites. We expect that, but it's actually coming at her so she got heavily criticized in the New York Times. And so if you haven't read that article,
I have
you need
not.
to read
I
it.
need to read that.
That's a liberal, they say it's left. I think it's center, but consider it left, and they're attacking her. And so I think
on what grounds?
This is a classic example of when you are a Black woman, it doesn't matter.
Trying to do something good.
It doesn't matter who all you're doing something good for. The attacks will come from every direction. And y'all were laughing last week when I used one of my cliches about the toes you step on, but I heard another cliche early in my career, and that was, the higher on the flagpole you go, the more your ass shows.
Yeah.
And so
Hello.
all they want to do is tear you down. And so that's where she's at. She's at the highest ranking position a Black woman has ever gotten to. So it's going to trigger the left and the right because the whites have never had to forego power. And she has power.
And now she has power. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
The filibuster failed again by Democrats. 2 Democrats.
Yep.
Okay.
So we can't. So these inherently are, when you look at this pattern in every system that we're in, every time a Black woman speaks, she's muted. Every time a Black woman rises up 2 notches, she's brought down by 3.
Yeah.
Every time a Black woman does this, it goes that way. Like they don't want or see us as valuable, and yet they depend on us to do their stuff for them. And I'm going to say it, that when you, in the business world, when you look at some of these women, my book talks about the whole middle management rank.
Right.
The people that have propelled them to middle management are the brown and Black people that can't get their jobs done without us. They can't. I don't care what industry you're in. The people below that are the workers, and the people who are working the hardest are the 5% population in those organizations that are the brown and Black people.
It's so interesting. The organization that I was at, people who were probably lower level than me are now managers and supervisors and directors. And that they came up a little bit, but they came up when all of us left.
What do you mean?
It's interesting for me to look back and say, who's the director now and who's the, And I'm like, oh, wow. She was just an account rep or an account executive. And now they are directors and managers and, supervising 6 people. And I'm like, wow, I didn't know there was a path. Why didn't I know there was a path? Yeah.
Oh,
What did Jocelyn say? But is Kamala for Black women?
is she surrounding
Is she
herself?
surrounding herself with Black women? I believe she has a lot of Black women staffers. I don't know the answer to that, but that has been
What do you
I've
think,
been told.
Jocelyn? What put something in the feed? Do you think she is for Black women, or do you think she's not for Black women?
That's a question to our audience. Yeah, that's a good question. Let's see what
Like, is
Jocelyn tells
she?
me.
I mean,
I think she is. But
I struggled with her as a candidate. I struggled with her as a candidate because I loved Elizabeth Warren, and I thought Elizabeth Warren was the woman
and I was
who.
the Bernie crowd. So.
Yeah, you were the Bernie. And I was concerned about because of her background. When you come out of that background, and so that was how I felt during election time. But when she was the nominee, I'm lying right up behind her to support her and help her. And so, from my perspective,
Queenie says she's in the middle, I think. She's in the middle, really?
Oh, they're all the moderates. So it's what Martin
Yeah.
Luther King said about the moderate Democrats, right? So she definitely is the middle. I agree with that.
Okay.
But I still was trying to, and I think we owe it to each other as Black women that even if we don't fundamentally agree with every single thing that Black woman does, and we never will all 100% agree.
No, we're not.
Can
ever
we
all gonna-
align with her and go fight
Correct.
with her? And so we complement each other. Joy's my co-host on here because she compliments me. As her husband, would say, how Joy articulates things and how Cindi articulates things. They're just two different styles, and that's what makes us a great team. And so I feel the same way about her in office, and I do for her what I would want another woman to do for me. And so I just think that we're never going to find the perfection, and the political ranks are so nasty that for Black women who are willing to step in that and go take the firing squad every single day of their lives, that's a unique. I mean, Jocelyn and some of our new listeners tonight, I don't know if you know, both Joy and I ran for the state legislature here in Washington State
and had 2 separate experiences.
And I say to this day I dodged a bullet because I watch how that plays itself out, and it's gross. And so for the women who are stepping in and standing up to this, then I just find it that we as Black women, and my call to action, both to Black and white women, is we have to unite. Like we have to come together and fight this. We're in the fight for our lives right now,
and
if
support each other.
Yes.
We need to back each other. Absolutely.
Like, just stop clawing at, that white women behavior of clawing at each other and fighting like middle school girls. Ain't nobody got time for that kind of mess. We are fighting for our lives right now. And if you don't think that these right R's are about to take over this year and they're taking away our rights, they're taking away our rights.
Slowly. What is that you showed me earlier? They're doing a bill out in New York. Where was that? Texas? No.
Which bill were you referring to?
The bill, DeSantis. Florida. Is that Florida? DeSantis?
Yes.
That's Florida.
Yes.
Where they're doing a bill so that white people won't
feel uncomfortable
in trainings.
They don't want us to talk. They don't want
in schools.
That meme that went around that said they showed a picture of Ruby Bridges. And the photos that went around about her, they don't want their grandchildren now to learn about their own behavior and what they did to us.
All those people that were standing out there, Ruby Bridges, and jeering her and calling her names and throwing stuff at her. Yeah.
They don't want their children and grandchildren to be taught the truth.
Yeah.
And so as long as we stay in the space
bill
passed today. So look,
I'm shocked.
So case in point that our rights are being taken away from us
slowly.
And so it's going to be it's
coming here.
I don't think it's slow. I think this year is going to be I
They're
think some
just
stuff is
coming
going
out
to
of
be
the
turned on
woodwork
its
with stuff.
It's going to be turned on its butt. Because Donald Trump's not going away. And let me say one more thing. Because if you want to understand like, let's just look at Liz Cheney for a minute. So Liz Cheney is now, voting with the Democrats
Oh,
on blah,
yeah.
blah, 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 blah. That is a white woman to pay attention to, because that white woman voted with Trump 90% of the time. And now she's trying to rise as the party leader. She has a motive in what she's doing right now.
Oh, yeah.
And every one of us Black women knows what that means when a white woman is claiming power. So let's just be clear about that. So then us as brown and Black women out here in the field who have to live with the consequences of them, it is our time that we need to start mobilizing and coming together and stop fighting each other over scraps and start working together to
Amen.
deal with this issue. We are out of time. Let me tell you really quick about our show next week.
Yes.
Our show next week, we're bringing on a woman. Her name is Kristen Graham. I cannot wait for you to hear. She's going to come on and talk with all of us. I especially need my Black women on next week because she's done a lot of work around negotiation power and knowing your worth is how I'm going to
Love
put that out
it.
there. And so I had said couple months ago that I was going to host a show like that, and we have that pulled together for you next week. So, hey, Joy, we're out of time. To our listeners who came on with us tonight, thank you for listening and participating in this conversation. It's a necessary one that we will continue to have throughout the course of this year on Heartbeat. So we look forward to seeing you all next week. All right, have a good week, everybody.
That up in Saks, our favorite Black businesses. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's Black. Yeah. Yeah. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's Black. Yo.